On this slide, you see a chart with the list of names of different fungi in the first column. And in the second column, you can see the names of the infections that can be caused by those fungi. This semester, we're going to go through all those fungi, and we will talk about them, their main characteristics and infections. But just for today's lecture, you have to know just one name from this chart. This one, it is Candida albicans. Candida albicans is a yeast. It is opportunistic fungus or opportunist, and it can cause yeast infection of mucous membranes of the mouth, especially in elderly patients and infants. We call it thrush. You have to know this term. Also, Candida albicans can cause vaginal infections in women. And the last one, candidiasis, it is a general yeast infection, usually affects immunocompromised patients. In general, fungal infections are not very contagious. And as I said before, for healthy individuals with a strong immune system, they're not life-threatening. But they can be very difficult to treat because they're very stubborn. And there are two reasons for that. First reason, fungal infections usually affect peripheral parts of human body: skin, mucous membranes, fingernails, hair, and for us to reach those areas, we have to increase doses of antifungal drugs. But even with the increased doses, it's still difficult to reach and kill those pathogens on peripheral parts of our body. Number two, you remember that fungi are eukaryotes. That means they have a structure of the cell is basically the same as human cells. That means those antifungal drugs that we're going to use to treat fungal infections actually not just going to affect those fungi, but also can be toxic for our cells as well. And because we have to increase doses of those antifungal drugs to reach peripheral areas, affected areas, that makes those antifungal drugs even more toxic. So that means that antifungal treatment sometimes can be dangerous because those drugs are not just toxic for fungi, but can be toxic for humans as well. Also, you have to remember that different fungi can produce toxins. For example, muscarine. Muscarine is produced by mushrooms and causes hallucinations in humans. Next toxin is ergot. Ergot can be produced by mold and it can be toxic to liver. It can cause liver damage. The next one is aflatoxin. Aflatoxin produced by fungus that grows on peanuts and cereal grains, also can cause liver damage. And finally, the last one is black mold toxin. It causes a very serious inflammatory disorder. We call it sick building syndrome. This toxin is produced by mold that grows in old buildings behind drywalls and in old ventilation systems. When this mold is inhaled by people, it can cause hyperallergic pneumatitis, means extensive damage of the lungs as a result of severe inflammation. Inflammation is chronic, is very difficult to cure, and eventually it forms a lot of scars in those affected lungs, and those patients eventually become disabled. The next group of eukaryotic microorganisms we're going to cover is Protozoa. As you probably remember from the previous lectures, Protozoa are single-celled organisms. There are four groups of Protozoa you have to know for this class, and this classification is based on motility or locomotion. The first group is called Flagellates. Flagellates move with the help of flagella or multiple flagella or single flagellum. The next group is called Amoeboids or Sarcodina. Amoeboids or amoebas for movement use pseudopods. The next group is Sporozoa. Sporozoa is the only non-motile group of Protozoa group. They cannot move. They don't move. And finally, the last group is called Ciliates. Ciliates are motile. They can move, and for movement, they use cilia. From this slide, from this chart, you have to know information from first two columns. It means you have to know names of all four groups of Protozoa that you see is in the first column, and what they use for movement. In the second column, they show you what they use for locomotion, for movement. Alright, so the first group of Protozoa is called Flagellates because they use flagella for movement or locomotion. For example, trypanosomes. On the left side of this slide, you see a picture of trypanosome. It has a leaf-like structure of the body. It has single flagellum that it uses for movement, as well as undulating membrane structure that is located on the side of the body of the cell, and as this undulating membrane is extended, then it pushes cell forward with the help of single flagellum. Example of trypanosome you have to know for your exam is trypanosome that causes African sleeping sickness. Very dangerous infection, protozoal infection that kills a lot of people basically every year. So again, one of trypanosomes causes African sleeping sickness. Another example of flagellate will be diplomonads. Diplomonads have double body with two sets of organelles, and for the movement they use multiple flagella. As an example from this group, you have to know Giardia lamblia. Giardia lamblia causes a very serious gastrointestinal infection. We call it dysentery. On this slide, once again, you see a picture of slides of trypanosome on the top picture. On the top picture, it's an example of trypanosome, and the bottom two slides show you pictures of Giardia lamblia. Giardia lamblia can exist in two forms: vegetative form, which is actively growing and multiplying form, left slide, and also it can form cysts, right slide, and cysts that is a resting form of this protozoa. The next group of protozoa is amoeboids or amoebas or Sarcodina. Amoeboids or amoebas use pseudopods for movement, and on this picture you see amoeba, and those are pseudopods. The structure of amoebas is very similar to structure of our phagocytes. Also, you have to remember that amoebas use pseudopods not just for movement, but also they use them for feeding. So basically, they engulf nutrients using pseudopods. From this group, as an example, you have to memorize Entamoeba histolytica. It causes dysentery, which is a GI tract infection. And then the next group is Sporozoa. Sporozoa, this is the only one group of Protozoa which is non-motile. Sporozoa cannot move. As an example, we have to know Plasmodium species because Plasmodium malaria causes malaria in humans. Another very serious infection, protozoal infections that kills a lot of people every year. Malaria is transmitted by mosquitoes. To be more specific, it is transmitted by female Anopheles mosquito type. But even more, it's just not transmitted by mosquitoes, but that specific mosquito is a part of the life cycle of Plasmodium malaria. So we can say that life cycle of Plasmodium malaria is very complex. It's composed actually or consists of two parts: sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Also, you have to remember that Plasmodium malaria can actually exist in different forms. Trophozoite is the first form. It is vegetative, actively multiplying form. The next form is called Sporozoite. Sporozoite is found in mosquito, and with this form, mosquitoes infect humans. And the last one is Merozoite. Merozoite infects red blood cells. Alright, let's look at the life cycle of Plasmodium malaria that you can see on this slide. As I said, life cycle of Plasmodium malaria is complex and consists of two parts: sexual reproduction, which occurs in mosquitoes' body, and asexual reproduction, which occurs in humans' body. Let's start from this point. Point 1. So when this infected mosquito bites human, it has sporozoids in salivary glands. When it bites human, it injects those sporozoids into the skin of that human. Within just few hours, those parasites get into the bloodstream of that patient. From the bloodstream, they will go through the blood vessels and get to the liver. The first stop for the parasite will be always liver. When parasite gets into the liver cell, it stays there for a while, grows, multiplies, produces more parasites, and eventually that liver cell will be destroyed and a lot of new parasites get back into the bloodstream. Now we call them merozoites. Merozoites go through the bloodstream and start infecting erythrocytes or red blood cells. When red blood cells get infected, this is what we call ring stage of malaria. Ring stage. Why? Because those infected red blood cells under microscope actually look like a ring. So once again, parasites stay within red blood cells, grow, multiply, produce more parasites, and eventually red blood cells will be destroyed and more merozoites get into the bloodstream once again. Please remember, when red blood cells get destroyed and a lot of new merozoites get into the bloodstream, this is the point when our patients develop symptoms of malaria, which are high fever, chills, severe headaches, muscle aches, seizures, jaundice. The skin of those patients will turn yellow. Why? Because a lot of hemoglobin from destroyed red blood cells get into the bloodstream. The liver will be affected as well. Spleen will be enlarged. The urine of those patients will be dark for the same reason, because a lot of hemoglobin gets into the urine. We call that urine black water urine or dark beer urine. But let's get back to our parasites. As I said, when red blood cells are destroyed, a lot of new merozoites will be released into the bloodstream. But besides merozoites, another type of cells will be produced on this stage. Those are male and female gametocytes. What is going to happen next? Merozoites will again get into the bloodstream and start infecting other red blood cells. But if this infected human will be bitten by mosquito at this point, that mosquito will get with that blood two types of cells, merozoites and male and female gametocytes. Merozoites will not survive within GI tract of mosquito. They will be destroyed eventually. But male and female gametocytes will survive. The female cell will be fertilized and eventually they will develop into sporozoites. Sporozoites then move from GI tract of that mosquito into salivary glands, and now this mosquito is ready to infect other humans and animals. So as you see, mosquito in this case, in this infection, is a part of the life cycle of Plasmodium malaria. Alright, another example of Sporozoa protozoa is Toxoplasma gondii. Toxoplasma gondii causes toxoplasmosis. This pathogen can infect pretty much everything, humans, animals, reptiles, and it infects every cell of human body except red blood cells. Humans usually get infected by toxoplasmosis when they ingest cysts of this pathogen, cysts of Toxoplasma gondii. And please remember, those cysts will be formed in the gastrointestinal tract of cats, because this is the only way how Toxoplasma gondii can reproduce sexually. Okay, once again, Toxoplasma gondii can reproduce sexually only within gastrointestinal tract of cats. Now, what are the symptoms of toxoplasmosis? Once again, for healthy individuals, toxoplasmosis is not a very serious or dangerous infection. A lot of people get infected with toxoplasmosis and recover without developing any symptoms, or they might develop only one symptom, which is not specific symptom. It is enlarged lymph nodes. And because it's not specific symptom, people actually recover, as I said, from this infection without additional treatment and without knowing that they actually recovered from toxoplasmosis. About 90% of population in the United States is seropositive to toxoplasmosis. It means once in life, those people been infected and developed immunity without most of the times developing symptoms. But as always, for immunocompromised patients, this infection can be very dangerous. For them, this infection can be dangerous because it goes systemic, affects all organs and systems, and sometimes it takes for us up to the year to get infection under control, or sometimes we're not even able to cure that infection, and those patients die from this infection. There's another group of patients that we have to worry when we talk about toxoplasmosis. Those are pregnant women. Why? Because in pregnant women, toxoplasmosis can cause spontaneous abortion or severe birth defects. And the last group of protozoa is ciliates. Ciliates are motile, and for the movement they use cilia. It is a hair-like structure that extends from the surface of the cell. What you have to remember is ciliates are predators, and because they are predators, they actually can move fast, and they also have ability to change direction of their movement rapidly. Also, you have to remember that ciliates have two nuclei in their structure: macronucleus and micronucleus. Macronucleus they use for vegetative growth. Micronucleus, the smaller one, they use for sexual reproduction. Only one organism from group of ciliates is a human pathogen. You have to remember this name. The name is Plasmodium coli. It causes GI tract infection of large intestine.